I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. My guest this week is Mark Kingsley.
That utopian urge is why people design. I went into design because I want to clean the world. I want to organize the world. And also in that kind of utopian push, we tend to abstract audiences. We abstract people into customer segmentations as opposed to individuals.
Mark Kingsley began his career designing album packages for legends like John Coltrane, Pat Metheny, and Quincy Jones, work that earned him a Grammy nomination in 2001 for Blue Note Records, before transitioning into corporate branding, where he led major initiatives at Landor and Collins for clients such as Citi, Ogilvy, and Equinox. Through his studio, Malcontent, he serves a diverse mix of clients from indie filmmakers to Pulitzer Prize winners. Mark teaches at the SVA Masters in Branding program, previously held the Melbert B. Cary Professorship at the Rochester Institute of Technology, and is currently head of brand for the fashion label Oumlil. His book, Universal Principles of Branding, became a bestseller in 2023, and his next, Brands in the Age of AI, is due out in December. My interview with Mark Kingsley is coming right up. But first...
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more to reach the professionals who are more likely to find your ad relevant. Plus, with 1 billion members on LinkedIn, that means you'll have access to 130 million decision makers and 10 million C-level executives. That's a lot of millions of the right people. Get started today and see how you can reach the right buyers with LinkedIn's enhanced targeting tools. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Business. How can you free up your team from time-consuming office tasks? Amazon Business empowers leaders to not only streamline purchasing, but better support their teams so they can focus on strategy and growth. Free up your teams and focus on your future. Learn more about the technology, insights, and support available at amazonbusiness.com.
Mark Kingsley, welcome to On Brand.
Thank you, Nick. Nice to meet you and speak with you.
So I love that you got your start designing album covers for iconic musicians. How did that early work in music packaging shape your overall approach to kind of packaging brands?
Not directly. It influences it not quite through osmosis. There's like a sedimentation that really happens. I got into music packaging because I desperately, passionately love music. And I love musicians, and I love hanging out with musicians. And I admire them because to go on a career path like that is to commit yourself to poverty and trials and tribulation. And, being a lapsed Catholic, that's a very kind of Catholic thing to be into. Another reason why I like the Tour de France, right? That's a very Catholic sport. It's about suffering on earth, So anyway, I'm a bad guitar player. I'm locked in a John Fahey vortex. So I admire anyone who can take the most ephemeral thing, which is a sound, and turn it into an emotion and that emotion doesn't necessarily have any kind of meaning attached to it. It doesn't have any kind of narrative or interpretive quality to it. It's just an emotional thing. So chasing that emotion, I guess, is what set me on that path. Now, unfortunately, the music industry disappeared for all intents and purposes. What you used to make several $1,000s doing packaging design is now, if you make $1,000, you're lucky. So it was a race to the bottom, and so I had to pivot. And through various friends and connections and surreptitious wanderings, I ended up in corporate identity and branding, which I thought was much more design based because I was trained as a designer, and I was approaching everything in that kind of executional, tactical design approach. But once I stood back and saw like how this was an opportunity to try and connect emotionally, I saw that through line that I had in music with this.
Interesting. And you talk about that through line of music and brands there, and I almost feel like another segue, at least from my perspective, your work with Blue Note Records, and I'm also a music fan. I've managed to get back into vinyl and my first record that I bought this time around was Something Else, the Cannonball Adderley, Miles Davis classic, and a Blue Note record. And as I think about that, it seems like that is a brand almost more so than or at least as distinct as others, that has a very strong visual voice to the look and feel of something from Blue Note. So talk a bit about that work.
So, Blue Note is one of those iconic brands, and it does have a very distinct visual style, mainly because, again, out of poverty and out of necessity. So, the photographer, Francis Wolff, was pretty much there at the very beginning of the label, and was a friend of Alfred Lyon, who founded the label. And then at one point in the late 1950s, they hooked up with a designer named Reed Miles, who created that iconic look, which was basically what I call a poor man's duotone, where you take a black and white photograph and put a flat color over it. And there was a very kind of typographic forward way of designing things, because he didn't have the money to do fancy photo shoots, didn't have the money to do pretty much anything. So it was all down to type and color and those basic elements. And if you repeat something, and the quality of the music's very good too. If you repeat something, then eventually people begin to build that association in their mind, which is what a brand is. A brand is an association in someone's mind. Don't let anyone else tell you anything else. That's exactly the structure and the function that happens mentally. What's also interesting about Blue Note is that at the same time, there was a certain kind of look and feel that musicians had to inhabit if they were going to be taken seriously as artists, as people to be looked up to as innovative artists. And what's interesting is that look and feel, some people have traced to the Andover Men's Shop in Harvard Square in Boston, where one day in the 1950s, Miles Davis, he was playing at Newport nearby, and he walked into the store and decided to start dressing in kind of like a very much more a way that was much more like white businessmen dressing.
Right.
And Miles Davis being so influential, that look kind of spread out throughout the whole jazz community. And so Blue Note also there's all these great images of like Blue Note musicians in Rudy Van Gelder's studio in Englewood, New Jersey, and like crisp white shirts and ties with a lot of cigarette smoke. And so it's a look, right? It's a really good look, but it's a polished look. And so it's a combination of consistency in packaging, magnificent product, and also the styling of the musicians themselves.
Well, I think another great takeaway in there is what you said, that it was an idea and an identity born of poverty. And I think there's something to that sometimes about constraints can inspire creativity that, I mean, the minute you said that, I'm like, well, it is incredibly simple, but through that, it established a powerful voice. So as we look at today, and you kind of talked about a lot of the shifts in certainly music and media, but as we look at building brands in a fast moving space, Are there constraints that we can utilize to stand out in a similar way today?
There's a plenitude of them. I mean, it really depends on, it's situational, it's contextual, it's all has to do with like the intention of the brand and all that bit. I do find, and this is something that I speak with my students. I do find that there's a utopian wish that runs through a lot of brand initiatives, and this utopian wish is, we're imagining like an ideal world. And that ideal world also has political ramifications, right? Because if something is idealized, it's idealized for a certain segment of the population, right? And so once you once you open it up to everyone, then it really means nothing at all. So there's a double-edged sword to that utopian thinking. First off, yes, if I make it ideal for a very select, specific group of people, then I can kind of coalesce a certain kind of mindset around that thing. But if I approach it like this can do this and this can do that and that can do that, you get into that kind of like a breathless bullshit of boardrooms and presentations, which really don't serve the brand, don't serve people either. So it's a weird thing. I mean, it's an interesting question, Nick, because you're making me think about this a little bit. That utopian urge is why people design. Design. I mean, I'm talking as someone who's studied graphic design. I went into design because I want to clean the world. I want to organize the world, and there is something there's some folly to that, and that folly is also fueled by my own ego. So how do I take my taste? How do I take my ego out of the equation and build something where people? It's a way to kind of connect somehow, to kind of see the person, to see the individual on the side of the audience, right? And so and also in that kind of utopian push, we tend to abstract audiences. We abstract people into customer segmentations as opposed to individuals. So it's a mix. I mean, it's a mess too.
Yeah. Well, I love that, talking about the idea of organizing the world, and it makes me think that branding is a topic to talk about as someone that sits here and has conversations like this for the past decade or so. It can be a squishy, elusive thing to talk about, especially when you formalize it and get into that boardroom bullshit that you just mentioned.
The tactical necessities of things. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you in creative strategy keep that grounded and accomplish what the boardroom needs without getting lost into the bullshit ether?
It really comes down to personalities. Honestly, it really does. It comes down to the personalities of the people you're working with, and the way the quality that you bring into the room when you step in and speak with people. There is no formula. There really is none, and which is why actively working on taking away your pride. And actively working on taking away your taste and understanding its role and position. Like your pride and your taste is what gives you the push to do the work as well as you can. But it's the knowing that your pride and your taste are there in service of other people, and not necessarily your clients either, but your clients' clients. And how do you keep that in mind? So I guess it just comes down to mindset. I've over the last few years, I've come to the realization, this is, being an older person who's, I'm over 50 now. So somebody who was trained as a designer, I see the folly of my mindset when I was in my 30s and early 40s. There was a pride that I had, which was about my relationship to the work as opposed to the work's relationship to other people. And but the problem is that we celebrate work that is more focused on the relationship of the designer to the work. I mean, look at all the design awards, right? All the design awards are kind of elaborate validation rituals for people who, are locked in a room somewhere and it's basically they're in dialogue with the thing in front of them, and they're not necessarily in dialogue with the larger audience. So there's a distancing effect that happens there.
On Brand will be right back after this.
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more to reach the professionals who are more likely to find your ad relevant. Plus, with 1 billion members on LinkedIn, that means you'll have access to 130 million decision makers and 10 million C-level executives. That's a lot of millions of the right people. Get started today and see how you can reach the right buyers with LinkedIn's enhanced targeting tools. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Heyday. Feeling stressed? Take a moment for yourself with Heyday. Stroll through rows of golden wheat, tend to cute barnyard animals, and discover the joys of a digital farm retreat. You don't have to hop in a car or catch a plane. Escape to the farm at the tap of a finger. With Heyday, you're not just tending to a farm, you're tending to yourself. Heyday. Search Heyday, that's Hay space DAY, in your favorite app store. Heyday is a free-to-play mobile game and offers optional in-app purchases and random rewards.
Now, back to the show. So Collins and Landor led creative strategy for some of the most recognized brands. How do you approach balancing legacy with innovation and repositioning?
Again, it depends on the company. For example, I was blessed to work on the Blue Note Records 60th anniversary initiative. I did a box set for them. That's the one that I got a Grammy nomination for. Did the logo for it and all that bit. And they had gone through other designers doing logos, and it was like, no, we don't. Not quite. But when I was asked to do it, I had no time, no money, and I was the fire department. Come in and like, can you fix this kind of thing? And a lot of my career was not me like, oh, here's the genius we want to call. I've always been the fire department. Oh, damn it! Oh, fine. Let's call Mark and have him do it. That kind of, and it's it does take a number on your ego, I guess. But I realized that Blue Note Records is obsessive about their history. They had this at the time they were 60 years old. They had this magnificent history, and they obsess about it. And so I leaned into that. So what I did is it was 60, and I knew of a certain Dexter Gordon record cover called Go, and Go looks like 6-0. So I basically took the same kind of general look and feel, like the arrangement, the typographic effect, all that bit, and just did a logo that looked like a little bit like Dexter Gordon's Go. This thing was approved within an hour.
Yeah.
So paying attention to other people, paying attention to other people's wants, needs, subjectivities tends to be the answer. So it didn't come from my ego. My ego and my pride in what I do and in me kind of connecting with my clients, that drove it. But if I put away my taste and it was like, okay, I'm not going to design this. Maybe I can have Reed Miles design this. And so so a lot of times I find myself, when it comes to, you ask about the tactics of things, I'm always looking for ways to not design something. I'm looking for ways not to do any work. Right. And so I did a project recently for the Music Appreciation Society in Denver. And it's a very, very small, like just 2-3 people operation. They put on these wonderful, like very intimate concerts. And so when it came time to do the color palette, I was like, how about every color? But the thing is, like, every color is combined in stripes. And the stripes are either made of duets, trios, quartets, or quintets.
Ooh.
Right. And so and it's just like, I gave up any kind of creativity. It's not me figuring out the colors. I'm like, okay, do a duet. Pick 2 colors. I don't care. Here's a whole range of colors to pick from. Do a duet, and off they go. Right. So this is another example of like me not doing as much work as possible. Now, when it comes to strategy, the classic thing is to look at the history of the company. But instead of looking at the history of the company and trying to amplify certain things like, oh, well, you are a cool company, and so we're going to make everything cool, I go in and say, okay, what is cool? Is it cool? And can we redefine cool in such a way? So I look at the essence. I try and find some sort of essence or some sort of authentic kind of reality, even though I disagree that any brand has any kind of real authenticity. Which is a whole other hour-long conversation.
Yes.
But I try and find that sense, that core of the thing that they center themselves around. And I use that as a thing with which to meditate upon, as opposed to something to exploit. Now, this comes down to a different way of thinking, right? So I can either think calculatively, which is what we all do when we're in the boardroom. When we're in presenting our brands, or we're trying to figure out our brands, we think in a calculative way. How am I going to do this in order to get the audience to do that? How am I going to build this product in such a way where people are going to love it or hate it, that kind of thing. We all need that. I mean, we do calculative thinking, and when I wake up and I'm like, how much time can I stick in bed and cuddle with my dog before I have to get up and greet the world? But meditative thinking is slowing down and understanding the relationship that our clients' work and our brands have with positioning ourselves in history and culture and society and with the world. And so it's a different mindset. And so I try and use that different mindset at the beginning of these projects. Now, granted, you can't do meditative thinking throughout the whole damn project because you never get the work done. I mean, meditative thinking likes to keep the idea open and suspended. So you have to kind of you reach a point where you go from the divergence into the convergence of, okay, I got to do the thing now. But that's generally what I try and engage in at the beginning of every project.
So how does that type of thinking inform? Because we've talked about your work in music. You've also worked with Pulitzer Prize winners, but you've also worked in financial services.
Mm-hmm.
And some folks might be listening and thinking, boy, all that creative thinking, meditative stuff sounds great for the arts. But how does it manifest itself when you're working in a very different, more maybe buttoned down sector?
So I did a project years and years and years and years ago. It was an initial round for a Citi private bank, and they wanted a new look and feel. And what is the greatest expression of wealth? How does one express wealth? I'm asking. I'm just kind of curious, like how would you express wealth?
I feel like how it gets expressed and my mind immediately goes to stuff.
Thank you. You're right. Absolutely. That
I don't
Nick,
love that, but that's yeah.
Nick, that's a perfect answer because that's the general answer that people go to, right? That's more of a calculative way of thinking. How do rich people, like really rich people, express their wealth? They express their wealth through their own. They explore the things that they're obsessed with. The greatest indicator of wealth is time and space. People with money have big empty spaces. People with money have the time to do things like Richard Branson go take a balloon trip around the world, or Jeff Bezos, put his whatever phallic shaped rocket up in the air in the space. So for private bank, I approach it like, okay, maybe I can design without designing. Can we design this thing so it's just white on white? Like kind of subtle grays on top of white, make the thing look as white and white as possible. And then when it comes to wealth management traditionally has images of like retired couples holding hands walking down the beach, right? It's like a bad Cialis ad.
Uh-huh.
And so I propose that wealth management be about accretion over time. So tree rings, nautilus shells, that kind of stuff, leaves, seeds. And unfortunately, I mean, it went well up until a point, you reach a certain kind of presentation, and someone at some level goes, no, it's got to be about stuff. And so there, they had to do it about stuff. But that's how I approached it, right? And I was successful up to a point. Not everything is successful, but this was a way for me to do something different, a way for me to do something that did not look like every other bank. And these are like the obscure little small Swiss banks that you've never heard of, that kind of stuff. That was my competition. And all of their work had a certain kind of look and feel, like a lot of blacks, a lot of dark blues and all that bit. And so they zig and we zag. So that's one way of like approaching, of applying that kind of thinking to a large non-arts client.
So you mentioned earlier, and I'm also an educator here at the University of Iowa, and you talked about lessons of your younger self. In teaching in the various branding programs that you have taught in. What's one thing that students need to understand that's different from 10, 20 years ago?
This isn't necessarily a lesson. It's more of like a mindset. And this is what I say to them at the beginning of every semester. I say that the most branding programs and most strategies kind of follow the Harvard Business School case study model, right? The Harvard Business School case study model built the world. It gave us the leaders of companies and at times the leaders of countries, right? What have they given us in return? Climate crisis, fractured politics, and economic inequity. Perhaps there is another way of looking at things. And so perhaps we need to emancipate ourselves from the Harvard Business School case study model and look at things in a much different way. And look at the way in which the work that we do has action. The actions that we take do not stop. They keep reverberating. There's an idea out of Heidegger on his question concerning technology, where he describes technology as a thing that humans do, as a way to kind of extend our capacity, extend our reach, extend our presence. So hammer extends my hand, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's a thing that humans do. But in effect, the knock-on effect of all technology is that it reframes all the world around you, because now I have this tool. And so I see all the world in a different way. Basically, it's like, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail kind of mindset. So can we emancipate ourselves from that kind of calculative Harvard Business School case study model where it's about results in a very narrowly defined term? Again, because right now the definitions are ROI, right, and the definitions are profits, which I'm all for it. I'm all for ROI, and I'm all for profits, but I am also for, kind of positive impact on human existence.
Right. Well, Mark, you've made me think, you've made me laugh, you've made me smile, and it is now my turn to get to ask you for a brand that has made you smile recently.
This is a brand that's made me smile since the 1970s. And it continues to.
Okay.
It's like Blue Note. It's ECM Records, which stands for Editions of Contemporary Music. In the 1970s, early 1970s, a German bass player and producer named Manfred Eicher started recording musicians that he loved. I think Randy Weston was one of the first ones. And had a very distinctive sound, recorded things at a recording studio in Oslo, Norway, with a really magnificent, beautifully wide-eared engineer named Jan Erik Koningsberg. And there's a sound to ECM Records. There's a place. There is a limpid beauty to ECM Records. And they do what you call improvised music. It could be jazz. They do classical music. And they've done some things that sound like dance music too. But there's a through line of quality and a through line of active intent, exacting kind of intention throughout all the products, including the packaging, the selection of musicians, the tours that they do, the whole thing. It's magnificent. They're the ones who released basically all the great Keith Jarrett records. Right? So
awesome.
Or Pat Metheny started on ECM. Avo Pärt, if you listen to Estonian composers, so they've done all stuff like that. So that brand makes me more than smile. It creates space. When I put it on, it creates an acoustic space. And how do we know space? We know space through sound. I don't know space through vision. But if you're in a room and you hear things and you hear like the ambient quality of the sound, that's what places us in space is sound. And so that's what ECM Records does. All, basically pop music, what it does is it tries to drown out that ambient space, but ECM allows that space to be.
I love that. Great, great smile. All right, Mark, where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Well, I'm at malcontent.com. And yes, I do have that URL. It's one of the great acquisitions of my life. And I'm also obviously on LinkedIn, and I'm also at faculty at the School of Visual Arts Masters in Branding program at branding.sva.edu.
Awesome. Well, we will link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can find at onbrandpodcast.com. Okay. Mark Kingsley, thanks for being on brand with us.
My pleasure, Nick. Thank you.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Robbie Samuels hosts the On the Schmooze podcast. Robbie, tell listeners what to expect from the show.
Since 2015, I've interviewed entrepreneurs who overcame challenges to achieve success in their field or industry. Tune in to On the Schmooze to listen as I ask deep questions to elicit untold stories about leadership and networking.
And where can people subscribe?
Find the show at ontheschmooze.com or on marketingpodcast.net, or just search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard them. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.